Hey guys, so tonight we're going to look at political participation. This is chapter 8 of your textbook. So by the end of the chapter, we'll be able to discuss how American voter turnout compares to other advanced industrialized democracies. We'll describe the industrial expansion of suffrage in America and how this affected voter participation. And then we'll outline what factors explain who participates in politics. So when we look at voting, you have voting age population and then we have voting eligible population. Voting age population is the number of eligible voters after reaching the minimum age. In the United States, that's 18. And so some of you guys are now part of that voting age population because you've had your 18th birthday. So you would be counted here. However, when you're looking at that voting age, not every 18-year-old that's in the United States can vote. And so we need to look at the voting eligible population because those are the people that can actually have the right and have the ability to go cast their ballot. And this is the number of eligible voters after reaching the minimum age, excluding individuals who are ineligible for other reasons. So you have this gap, and we're going to look a little closer at that gap. When you look, the blue line represents that voting age population, the VAP, which is those 18 plus year old folks in our society. The voting eligible population, the VEP, is that red line. And if you notice, from about the line seems to be really close, right? Until about 1976. And then we start seeing the gap really happen there, and that there's a gap between that voting age population and voting eligible. So there are certain things that will keep you from voting. If you're incarcerated, you cannot vote. So if you're in jail, you can't vote. There are certain crimes that if you commit, you lose your right to vote. If you live in the United States, but you're not necessarily a citizen, you can't vote. I have dear friends who have lived here for, 20 plus years now, I believe. They're from Australia. They are legally here. They pay property taxes because they own property here. They pay income taxes because they earn money here. They're contributing members to society. They cannot vote because they are not United States citizens. So they would be in the voting age population, but would not be in that voting eligible population. When we look at non-voting, why do people not vote? What are barriers to voting? Are modern requirements such as voter ID laws a barrier to voting? So you've really seen a lot in the news about the voter ID issue. Both sides of the fence, Republicans and Democrats, have their stance on it. Some people believe that you shouldn't have to show any identification to vote. Some people think you should, and that just becomes a voter fraud issue versus a making sure everybody who has the right to vote can vote. So one of the other big factors has been, should all states allow everyone to vote by mail? There are pros and cons to this. The pro is making voting easier for eligible citizens. It's so much easier to just mail a ballot back, right? Especially if it's got the postage paid on it and everything. You just drop it in a mailbox and you're done. The cons have been raising concerns related to voter fraud. If we all lived in the same apartment, we were all roommates, and that mail came to all of us. We all got our voter card in the mail to vote. What would keep me from opening all your mail and voting the way I want and then casting a ballot for all of us? Rather than, you can't really make sure that the person who actually filled the card out did actually vote. What it really becomes down to, though, is do those pros outweigh those cons? We have done some things to try to improve voter turnout because Americans really don't vote. Probably the biggest movement for this was the National Voter Registration Act, or the NVRA. A lot of people call this the Motor Voter Act. It was passed in 1996. It's responsible for voter registration in government agencies. What gave it the Motor Voter Act is when you go to renew your license at 18, when you get that 18-year-old license, and you have to go in person, you're going to be given the option to register to vote. Take it. Okay, you want to take it. You want to say, yes, I want to register to vote, because then you're done, right? And it's already a done deal. If you haven't registered to vote by now, you can't vote in the upcoming election because you have to register a certain number of days out. And so if you've taken care of that with your driver's license, you're done. once you register to vote, you don't have to re-register to vote unless you move. You stay registered to vote. So you want to make sure that you do that when you do your driver's license. This was very successful at increasing our voter registration, but it still didn't get people to the polls to actually cast their ballot. So we're still having a hard time getting people to believe their vote counts and to go vote and actually be participants in their government. So the rise of the American electorate, elections were initially under complete state control. So voting in Texas looked very different than voting in Alabama, looked very different than voting in Georgia, looked very different than voting in New York, looked very different than voting in California. They look totally different from state to state. But over time, the federal government has increased its involvement, like with everything else. We know the government has gotten larger. This is one of the issues. Some growth is good growth, right? And so we wanted to standardize the process of how we voted. But there are ways of disenfranchisement. Disfranchisement is keeping people from voting. And we did that with racial and ethnic minorities. There were literacy tests, so you had to be able to pass a basic skills test before you could vote. There were poll taxes where you had to pay for your vote. In order to vote, you had to go, you paid your poll tax, then you got to vote. There was the grandfather clause. This was done when slaves were first freed. And it said that if your grandfather didn't vote in the election, in the last election, then you weren't eligible to vote. So what that did was it created a cycle, right? Because your grandfather was never eligible to vote because the previous grandfather wasn't. And so it kept that, keeping the African Americans from voting. And then we had white primaries, where the primaries were just for the white people. Again, if you look in the blue circle, they're talking again about voter ID laws and are they disfranchising the minority voters, especially in our Hispanic populations? Is it keeping people from voting if you have to show a valid ID? The argument from the right has been that you can go and get a state ID. It doesn't have to be a driver's license, but a legitimate state ID. It looks like a driver's license. It's not a driver's license, but it is an official identification. The left says that, that's still, it's almost like a poll tax because you are charged with getting a state ID. Personally, I think we should have IDs, but I think we should make sure that the ID is available for all. So why not just make the state ID free, right? We could do it in the schools. We could actually, as you turn 18, that you get that done and you get registered to vote and you're good to go. But I don't rule the world. The legal fight for suffrage is Smith versus Allwright in 1944. This barred political parties from excluding African Americans from voting in the primaries because really you put the candidates forward in the primaries, so those primaries are really important votes. The Shelby County versus Holder in 2013, this required Congress to consider present day rather than the historical discrimination when determining which states and localities require federal preclearance, meaning that the feds would get involved. So what's happening present day, not historical data, and should we allow the feds to be involved? So forms of participation, when we look at the voting eligible population, about 20% will display a yard sign, bumper sticker, or a button. Approximately 15% will give money to a candidate or party, so they actually make real political contributions to the campaigns. Approximately 10% will attend a political meeting or rally, and approximately 5 to 6% volunteer for a campaign. Now you notice that you're not seeing the social media, and really you've seen more and more electioning going to the social media. They're seeing that is a valuable way to get in front of people, right? Like when I'm on TikTok now, it's become increasingly political for me, probably because it does the algorithms and knows I teach government, and so it throws that to me. But my TikTok feed has a ton of political stuff on it. And so we know that people are realizing the reach that social media has, and they're choosing to participate in that way. Political participation among young people, though, statistics show older people vote. So if we were looking at me versus you, the statistics would say that I would be more likely to vote in an election than you would, for whatever reason. And it's been that way ever since I was your age. Voters aged 18 to 24, they register primarily because of that voter motor law, but they vote at much lower rates than voters age 65 and older. You actually register lower also, but you'll see when we look at the numbers that you guys will register, but then you don't go to the polls and vote. this national debate reflects these trends. You see the debates that really kind of target the older population because they watch the debates. Your age group tends to not. Um, and does it matter that political participation among young people lags behind older voters? I would say absolutely yes. They know you don't vote, so they don't listen to you. If you want your voice heard, you have to vote because you can see if a person voted in a primary or election. You can't see how they voted. Remember, we talked about that, but you can see if they voted or not. And so, if you want politicians to listen to you, then you're going to have to actually do the vote. This is another graph, turnout by age versus registration by age. You can see it's similar. You see bigger valleys, though, on the actual turnouts than you do on the registration. The red line is 65 plus. That's older than I am. I'm going to be 50 in March, so this is still, I'm kind of somewhere in this middle area right here. 65 plus, you see really most of them vote. Some people would argue that's because they don't have anything else to do, right? They're not working, they're not raising children, they're not doing all these other things that demand their time, and so they go and vote. Registration by age is kind of the same way. So we've gone over these factors, and you've learned how American voter turnout compares to other advanced industrialized democracies. You've described the historical expansion of suffrage in America and how this affected voter participation, and you outlined what factors explain who participates in politics.